a phenomenon. Okay, we'll talk about a phenomena that I like to call sleeping boards. Yeah, and we'll see what that means. We talk about minutes of meetings. Just recently, I was chatting with somebody from a credit union, an elected officer, and the person was saying to me, Jerome, is the credit committee supposed to keep minutes of its meetings? And I said, but of course, if it is the credit committee, yes, and its creditor saying, doesn't keep minutes of its meeting, and something goes wrong or somebody wants to challenge what they've done, how do they protect themselves? Where is the record of the discussions, the decisions? Now, of course, by extension, the same thing is going to apply to the supervisory committee. The supervisory committee is doing lots of things, but are they keeping an official record of what is being done? Another example, a member of a supervisory committee said to me yesterday, well, I wrote the Commissioner for Cooperatives a letter in my private capacity. And I said, in your private capacity? What does that mean? You are a member of the supervisory committee. Did you write as chairman, secretary, or collectively as the supervisory committee? No, I wrote in my private capacity as a member of the supervisory committee. I said, my good sir, there's no such thing. So the cash receipts on disbursement, we may not talk about that. We will talk about loans. We will talk about investments. That's a big one. So let's jump in. Now, unless otherwise stated, the legal references that I give you will be the Cooperative Societies Act, Chapter 8103, the Cooperative Societies Regulations, and your bylaws. Yeah? So for every piece of legislation, you have the Act of Parliament, that's the Cooperative Societies Act. It says jump. The regulations that go together with the Act of Parliament normally explains not jump, but how high to jump. So that the Cooperative Societies Act talks about you can have statutory committees or committees that the statute, the law dictates, but it is the regulations that say how these committees function. So I refer you to Regulation 50, subsection 3C2. It talks about what is the role of the supervisory committee. It gives it legal status. Now, dive a little deeper. Because the supervisory committee is meant to have some level of autonomy, is meant to have a certain degree of transparency and a lack of bias, the law says that if you are a member of the supervisory committee, you cannot be eligible for membership to the board or to the credit committee. Because a huge part of your job is having oversight or review of what the board does and the credit committee. So if you are also part of that committee, it's like himself to himself. Now, an important thing to mention here, because I've seen situations where the organization says, we are having an event, let's say a children's Christmas party, and we want to make sure that everything is transparent, so we would like to appoint a member of the supervisory committee to the planning committee for the children's Christmas party. Short answer, no. Every activity the credit union has, the supervisory committee has authority to have oversight and or review of that activity. So if you appoint a member of the supervisory committee to the committee that is planning the children's Christmas party, you're already creating a problem. Yeah? Now, to properly function on the supervisory committee, we must understand the structure of the organization. So let's look at that a little bit. What really is the structure of a credit union? Now, in most other organizations, you tend to see a situation where you might have the board on the top or management on the top and the shareholders at the bottom. In our particular case, it's the exact opposite. The single most powerful, the single most important grouping, hang on, I just realized I didn't turn on my camera. Yeah, sorry about that. The single most important grouping in a credit union will be the members in general meeting. If you happen to have a copy of the society's bylaws, I will guarantee you that in that bylaws, you would see a clause that says the supreme authority of the credit union, or differently phrased, the supreme authority of the society, being the cooperative society, will be the members at a properly constituted general meeting. So it is the members at that properly constituted general meeting that have all the power. Now, you can't have a general meeting every day. So what happens is that those members at that properly constituted general meeting, they delegate some of their power to the supervisory committee, to the board, and to the credit committee. So it is an act of delegation when they go through the process of election. And that is why at the annual general meeting, you have a supervisory committee report, you have a board report, and you have a credit committee report. These reports, as an issue of governance, says to the supreme authority, being the members at a properly constituted general meeting, this is what I have done with the authority you have given to me over the last 12 months. Are you pleased with it? And if the general meeting is pleased with it, they accept the report of the supervisory, the board, and the credit committee. And please note, I stress, they accept. There are times we go to meetings and we hear things like, do you accept? And then do you adopt? And do you? No. The proper form as an issue of law of meetings is that you accept the report. Supervisory committee, take note. That act of acceptance of the report makes the report the organization's report. It is no longer the supervisory board or credit committee. It is now the organization's report. Now, I know somebody is saying, but Jerome, if the proper thing is to accept the report, how come people occasionally talk about adopt the report? I'm glad you asked that. Quite simply put, if there are recommendations within the supervisory board or credit committee report, the proper course of action is, if any, is to adopt the recommendations. Yeah? Ken Jarvis, properly constituted general meeting. Yes, Mr. Jarvis. Did I say something other than that? Pardon me if it was a slip of the tongue. But yes, properly constituted general meeting. Now, you would realize the board of directors, supervisory, and credit are all in the same line. There is often a belief that the board is more important than the supervisory or credit committee. Let me dispel that rumor. They are all equal. They simply have different functions. They all operate under delegated authority of the members in a properly constituted general meeting. The board has responsibility for the creation of policy, as well as a certain level of direction over the operations. Yeah. So that the board, in order to properly function, again, I say this for the benefit of the credit committee, sorry, the supervisory committee, they can appoint a number of subcommittees, a number of ad hoc committees. They can hire a manager who will be the most senior employee. That manager would then supervise, direct other employees. Now, let's go on quickly. The purpose, again, we're looking at the regulations, cooperative societies regulations, is to keep an eye on the operation of the credit union, not on their own behalf, but on behalf of the membership. Now, if you have to keep an eye on the operations, it means logically, you must understand how a credit union is meant to operate. Yeah? So, is the board doing something right? Is the board doing something wrong? You must understand what is the role and function of the board. And I give you another reference, Section 22 of the Cooperative Societies Act. Do we have bylaws? Yes. Are the bylaws up to date? I don't know. I will give you a suggestion. If you flip through your bylaws and you go to the very last page of the bylaw, it will give you an idea when last your bylaws would have been updated and approved. Your last page. So if you are seeing something like 2014, when we're in 2024, maybe, just maybe, your bylaw may need some updating. Yeah? Again, general supervision of what's going on. How is the board elected? Has this happened properly? Those who are outgoing, are they properly put before the nomination committee? Credit committee. So again, within the powers of the supervisory committee, they must understand how the credit committee functions. So that the larger your organization is, you will have things like loan officers, maybe a loan manager. You may see things like the general manager purporting to approve loans. But I ask you to take note. Regulation 34 of the Cooperative Societies Regulation specifically speaks to the role of the credit committee in the approval of loans. So if the supervisory committee was reviewing loans, they would check to see what was the methodology used, who had ultimate approval of this loan in question that we are reviewing. But what does Regulation 34 say? Because you must know this. Regulation 34 basically says, if you have a society, of course, meaning a cooperative society, whose primary object is the granting of loans, that's Tranquility Credit Union, and in whose name the words credit union appear, that's Tranquility Credit Union. It says that the authority for the granting of loans is the credit committee. Doesn't say the loan officer, doesn't say the loan manager, doesn't say the general manager, and it certainly doesn't say the board. Matter of fact, Regulation 34 goes on to say, in all other cases, the authority to grant loans will be with the board. And what are the all other cases, supervisory people? Well, it's quite simple. The all other cases refers to situations where the primary purpose of the cooperative is not the granting of loans. And within the name of the cooperative, the words credit union does not appear. By way of example, Piaco Taxi Cooperative. Yeah? Oh, well, that's exactly what I called out for you just now, right? Like what Regulation 34 says. All right. Here's a little news story that when I saw it, I fell in love with it. Now, while at the time they focused on the Integrity Commission, I think it is instructive for us. Yeah. So it said, now this from 2009, it said, with so much already said and written about the Integrity Commission, another question remains to be considered. Why are the same people being recycled through many board appointments and other leadership positions? Let me say that again. Why are the same people being recycled through many board appointments and other leadership positions? Now, people take note. If we were to superimpose our credit union in this statement, will it be true to say that we have many elected officers who are being recycled and we don't have any new blood? We don't have members coming forward willing to serve their credit union, willing to impart their knowledge into the management of their hard-earned and saved funds. So we have the same people over and over. It goes on to say, with a few persons holding or being recycled through different positions of power, politics, and leadership, a generation might be stalled, even though they appear quite prepared to create and exploit new media for opinions and consensus, even as the monopolists hold firm in their generational places. Translate. I came across a word, a phrase some time ago. It's called gerontocracy. I'll leave you with that one. The full story, which at the time was by Dr. Rolf Balgobin, Sleeping Boards, Unbridled Management. We often say traditionally in the movement that the supervisory committee is the watchdog of the credit union. And here's another example for us. At the time, they were talking about Mr. Dupre. So Mr. Dupre is hailed as a fantastic entrepreneur who has taken advantage of Mr. Harry Narayan. Remember that name? Also associated with a credit union, as having struggled to manage a run on the Hindu credit union. They also make reference to Stanford. Remember that name? Right. Now, basically what they're trying to say here is if the supervisory committee doesn't do its job, doesn't pay attention to what is going on, you are going to have people running rampant. At the time, also with Hindu Credit Union, it says, how does someone take hundreds of millions or billions of policyholders and depositors' money, promise a high rate of return, then invest in liquid assets with lower rates of return without getting the attention of the board of directors? Are the board of directors paying attention? By extension, is the supervisory committee ensuring that they pay attention? What does the supervisory committee report say? Does it say, we are happy you elected us to serve, we served for 12 months, we thank you for the opportunity, and it says nothing else? Boards have critical functions, one of which is oversight. A good board must ask tough questions of the management. Slumber is important, my last line, but not in a boardroom. A president of a credit union once said to me, when I questioned what was going on, we do things differently in this credit union. We hire professional staff and we let them run. But what's the supervisory committee and the board doing? And this slide says, when directors and officers fall asleep, a number of very bad things happen. Management does what it wants and come to believe that is omnipotent. And I've met a lot of management people that think that. I remember once a manager said to the staff, boards come, boards go, but I will always be with you. And I asked the question, what was the supervisory committee doing? Have you looked at the management reports? Have you looked at the board report? When these things happen and there's no oversight from the supervisory committee, it means that anything that is brought to the board because of fait accompli. So we're sure it's going to get passed. So that the board is effectively a rubber stamp. But the check and balance is the supervisory committee. Is looking after the interests of the shareholders. Who is looking after the member? And remember, in a credit union, it's a unique situation. In a credit union, the client is not just a member, they are also part owner of the organization. If we allow these things to happen, if the supervisory committee is sleeping, if the supervisory committee does not have a plan of action or an audit plan for the year, it's a matter of time before failure comes. Yeah? So you see that pattern, right? There can be no excuse for directors and officers who do not understand their role. And I say directors and it says officers. If you are unsure who's an officer, I would refer you to section 1 of the Cooperative Societies Act, the interpretation section, which defines anyone who is in a position to give general direction of the affairs and operations of the credit union as an officer. So the definition of officer also includes certain levels of staff. An elected officer, you're a member of the supervisory committee, you should be honest, unselfish, and act for the good of the society's members. You should be interested in the credit union and give of your time and skills. If you're on the supervisory committee, do you understand the concepts associated with a financial institution? Let me go a step further. Can you read, understand, and interpret financial statements? Because Tranquility Credit Union is first and foremost a financial institution. And if you have been elected and you don't understand it, have you reached out to the education committee or to the board to access training in understanding and interpreting financial statements? Do you know that the balance sheet of the organization must be signed by the chairman of the supervisory committee? Will you sign a balance sheet that you yourself cannot interpret? Overall rule to ensure compliance with the laws of the credit union and the laws of the land. So you must understand Cooperative Societies Act and Regulation, Chapter 8103. You must understand the Constitution of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, because the Constitution says once you're a citizen, you have rights. Is it possible that the credit union makes a bylaw that infringes on your rights as a citizen? And if it does, what does that mean? And your first line of defense here is the supervisory committee to pick that up and bring it to the attention of the organization. Yeah? I already hinted again about the role of the credit committee that you must understand. Take it a step further. As supervisory committee, you must have access to and must have read the loan policy, because that is the policy the credit committee is going to operate within. Investments. I will go to say when you go home, but you're home already because you're online. Go back on your last brochure, the last AGM brochure. Do you see anything in that AGM brochure about investments? They will be in the financial statements and they will be in the notes to the accounts. And the first paragraph in those notes to the account says these notes form an integral part of the financial statements. So what level of investments does Tranquility Credit Union have? Here's an example that I love to pull out. It was something at the time called the Clico Investment Fund. Many credit unions invested in that. But let me whisper to you an issue. The Clico Investment Fund, was that something that a credit union could simply, as the old people say, wash the foot and jump in? Supervisory committee. Let me touch a little bit on minutes of meetings, because you're supposed to be reviewing minutes of meetings as well. So that if you're looking at minutes of meeting, just a little snapshot, not deep. What are you checking for? Was the board meeting convened in accordance with the society's bylaws? What does the bylaws say about the convening of board meetings? What does the bylaws say in terms of attendance of board members? What could be termed a well-kept minutes of the meeting? Is there follow-up on recommendation or actions to be taken in the minutes? Are the minutes signed by the secretary and the president? Because your bylaw says for it to be official minutes, it has to be signed off by the president and the secretary. And do I have it last? It's hugely important. When that meeting started, whether it's board or credit committee, was there a quorum? Was the quorum maintained throughout the entire meeting? These are things the supervisory committee is supposed to be checking. What is a quorum? Does the supervisory committee know? In case you were wondering, a quorum is the minimum amount of persons that must be present to take legal decisions. So if you didn't have a quorum to start, or you lost your quorum during the course of the meeting and you took decisions, are those decisions legal? A little snapshot again. Okay, you see how work to do it? Cash receipts and disbursements. Who's authorized to receive cash in the credit union? Yeah. Who's authorized to sign checks? Any and everybody can sign checks, right? You may or may not have noticed there was an article in today's newspaper, I think it was The Guardian, where it's talking about looking to institute, well, possibly polygraph testing for certain level of public officers. Persons who could create documents. And this wide range, you know, those of you who are in the know, you would be aware of the fact that there was a commercial bank that lost a couple $1 million well because of a scheme that happened with car loans. And the financial institution had, as part of the loan process, they got certified copies of motor vehicles that supposedly they provided loans for. The investigation showed that the certified copies were counterfeit. But employees authorized and disbursed the payments. So who's authorized to do that within the credit union? Well, a little snapshot of loans. Does the loan application form state the purpose for which the loan was made? Does it have to? Yes, because within the Cooperative Societies Act, it says, if the society becomes aware that a member has used a loan for a purpose other than what was stated, the credit union can demand full repayment of the loan immediately. Now, you can't determine if it was used for a purpose other than what was stated if the loan form doesn't have the purpose. What about security? If any security was required, when you review the loan forms, does it state the security? I remember reviewing a loan at time, and believe it or not, the security was listed as pillowcases. I kid you not. Pillowcases was the security for the loan. Was the loan application properly filled out? Here's a big one. Was the loan application signed by the member? Watch this one here. Was the approved loan correctly posted to the member to whom it was granted? You're saying, but Jerome, that's impossible. If Jerome applied for a loan, it must be posted to Jerome's account. One would think so. But evidence has shown us otherwise. So you had to check that too. What about loans to officers, which is covered under Part 4 of the Cooperative Societies Act, which deals with property and funds of the society? And part of it says that if you are an officer, remember Section 1 interpretation, and you're applying for a loan in excess of your shares, deposits, and accumulated dividends, there's a particular process that you must go through in order to get a loan. So when the supervisory committee is reviewing loans, are they looking at that process? Are they aware what that process is? Let's go across quickly to investments, keeping an eye on the time. So, as I mentioned before, look at your brochure, your AGM brochure, and the questions you're asking. I'm providing you with little checklists here. The investments, do they need or did they need to be approved by the Commissioner for Cooperative? And if they did, is there approval? Because the law says, if you are making an investment in a government-backed security, you don't need approval. But once it's outside of that, you do. Is there evidence that shows the society owns the investment? Because back in the days of CLICO, there was a particular investment, executive something it was called, where it was designed as an investment not for a company, but for an individual being a natural person. And we saw, when the dust settled, that a number of credit unions bought into that investment. But since legally it could not be in the name of the credit union, they put it in the name of whoever was president. No, I'm not seeing your cameras on, so I'm not seeing the looks of disbelief, but I'm telling you the truth. So the credit union money was invested in the name of whoever was the president. Do you have any idea what would happen if the president passed away and their next of kin laid a claim on that investment that was in the president's name? Members' money? Where was the supervisory committee? I'll just give you some snapshots. Talk about understanding financial statements. So what really is financial statements? What is it supposed to show? Yeah? Can you see the relationship between the income statement, the receipts and payments, The balance sheet, well, they don't call it balance sheet anymore. It's a statement of financial position. What about the cash flow statement? Do you understand the methods that can be used? Is it horizontal? Is it vertical? Is it that you look at trends over time? When you go back and look at your AGM brochure, you would realize it covers 2 years, 2 time periods. So you can look at a trend, you can make analysis of 1 year over the next. Let me give you another snapshot. Because although we say the Act is 1971 and it's outdated, here's a little snapshot. This comes from the Cooperative Societies Act, Section 69, subsection 1, and it says, any member, we're talking here about member of the credit union, any agent, that's somebody acting on behalf of the credit union, or employee, well, you know who that is, of a society who corruptly accepts, agrees to accept, obtains, or attempts to obtain, we cover everybody, every act there, whether for himself or another, any gift or consideration. And what's the difference? A gift you can get that is not necessarily something of value, but consideration is something of value. It doesn't have to be cash. And you are either trying to get that or you have gotten that as an inducement or reward. So an inducement is something that encourages you to act in a particular way. A reward is something that you get after you have acted in a particular way. For doing or forbearing to do any act relating to the business of the society. And you know the business of Tranquility Credit Union is the acceptance of deposits and the facilitation of credit. And you're doing these things, or you're trying to do these things, either to show favor or disfavor, so that these things happen for you to give somebody a blight. Or if I don't like somebody, I try to encourage you by some inducement or some reward to give somebody pressure. So that's one end of the spectrum. But it goes on to say, not only the person who receives, but if you corruptly give, or you agree to give, or you offer any such gift or consideration to any member of the credit union, anybody acting on behalf of that agent or an employee, that you're guilty. Now, while it says a fine of $4,000 and to imprisonment for 2 years, I should say to you that there are a number of amendments within the act there, and I think that $4,000 went up to $50,000 in the recommended amendment. Yeah? All right. So that I know I went a little quicker, but don't worry, I didn't want to go beyond 7, and this is the last slide. So here's a little snapshot that I'll take you through. First and foremost, the Constitution, Chapter 102. It is known as the Supreme Law of Trinidad and Tobago, and you cannot have any law that contradicts what is in the Constitution, and if you do, then it is void to the extent of the contradiction. So, is there anything in your bylaw? Is there anything in your credit committee, your credit policy that contravenes the rights enshrined under the Constitution? Of course, the Cooperative Societies Act, you must become very familiar with that. The Financial Institutions Act, in particular, I would recommend you take a look if you have the time. I think it's section 17, subsection 2, which was amended in 2021. And what that did is that set the stage for central bank to grant licenses in Trinidad and Tobago to varying types of organizations that wish to issue electronic money, e-money. Now, Supervisory Committee, or those planning to go, have you ever heard of e-money? Do you know that's the next big thing? Are you prepared to deal with it? Is Tranquility Credit Union prepared to deal with it? Let me just throw something out at you. And I've started asking credit unions this question. There are currently, you see, 1, 2, 2.5, if I remember, companies. Well, all right, let me put it better. There are 2 companies that have already obtained licenses from central bank to issue e-money in Trinidad and Tobago. There's a 3rd company that got a provisional license to do the same thing last February. Now, I won't tell you the names of the first 2 companies. You may not know them, but the company that got a provisional license to issue e-money, it's called TSTT. Maybe you've heard of them. And if TSTT starts issuing e-money and a member comes to pay their loan using e-money issued by TSTT, and you say, well, we ain't prepared for that, can that member be said to be delinquent if they offered to pay in something legitimate, but you just weren't ready for it? Supervisory Committee, what say you? The Truck Act. For every case that you've had to deal with a member who has a loan and there's a salary deduction, you need to be familiar with the Truck Act. The Computer Misuse Act. Almost every bit of data in Tranquility Credit Union is computerized. How does this affect it? POCA, the Proceeds of Crime Act. Yep. That deals with money laundering, terrorist financing, and the like. The Electronic Transfer of Funds Crime Act. Does the credit union have a debit card offering? If it does, you need to be aware of that. Limitation of Certain Actions Act. Ever heard of the phrase statute bar? That's where that comes from. The Central Bank Act, which also is in line with Act number 4 of 2009, Section 44C, deals with the emergency powers of the central bank. And in 2009, there was an amendment that basically said, as long as an organization poses a threat to the financial stability of Trinidad and Tobago, we don't care who's supervising you, we come in. Emergency powers of the central bank. Anti-Terrorism Act, self-explanatory. FIU Act, the financial obligations regulations go hand in hand with Proceeds of Crime Act, and it will cover things such as if somebody is coming to apply for membership in Tranquility Credit Union, what are they supposed to provide? Are they supposed to provide 2 forms of ID? Are they supposed to provide a proof of address? Are they supposed to provide a proof of, proof of income or a source of income, which incidentally is not the same as a source of funds? It's 2 different things. The Forgery Act. What if I apply for membership in Tranquility Credit Union, but I use what we call a Frankenstein ID? I know what they're saying, he making these things up. No, that's a real thing. And when you get confused with all that has gone before, the interpretation. Of course, another times we will talk more about these things, but just as a snapshot again, within the Interpretation Act, there's a section that deals with time and distance. So if the credit union writes a member about a loan payment and they say, we have noticed that your loan has not been paid. We are inviting you to come in to have a chat with us within the next 14 days. How do you calculate those 14 days? Are they 14 working days? Are they 14 straight days? What about if Emancipation Day falls between those days? Okay, so by my clock, it's now 7:05. I know we started late, but you guys would have planned to go until 7. Yeah. So let me pause there. I didn't see any hands raised during it, so I don't know if we'll take any questions now or we'll just start sharing virtual refreshments.
We can have a segment where it says we ask questions, Mr. Chambers. So we'd open the floor for anyone who has questions to Mr. Chambers on that wealth of information that he just gave us.
All right, so this is your way of saying no virtual refreshments. All right, I hear you.
I will email it to you afterwards, Mr. Chambers.
Maxwell, talk to me.
I asked him a question and I anxious because you're so good at it. There's so many things came up while you're speaking there. I mean, for the longest while, I haven't heard a person speak like that in this country.
All right.
But
I should start my own political party then.
I wonder if I should. But you pass that. I wonder if I should wait because what you were saying there is you're asking for more time, or you want to give us a little time to relax.
Well, no, I like to respect people's time, and I know your members would have planned for up till 7. You know what I mean? And anything that I do after could raise a whole different thing. So that I mean, as we go forward, we could always plan another time, that kind of thing. Because as I told you, as I told your marketing lady, trying to talk about supervisory committee role in 1 hour is akin to walking on water. All right, I've seen something in the chat window there. Let me see. Afisha Julian says, what is the best practice in terms of the transition period between serving on the supervisory committee and offering yourself to serve on the board? I'm tempted to say there's no best practice there. If you're serving on the supervisory committee, it normally should be because you have some level of skill or talent to do those functions. I know there are times that people like to say, you can't just jump on the board. You have to earn your keep first by doing something less, but the supervisory committee is not less than the board. It is equally important, it simply has different functions. Yeah? So that if you're very interested in governance and accounting, things of that nature, maybe a tailor-made for supervisory committee. Yeah? And something comes to mind. I was doing some training in Tobago recently. And I think my section was credit committee. Yeah, THA was dealing with it. And after we spoke, a lady came up to me and said, I have been serving on the credit committee in this credit union for years. But there are things you spoke about I have never heard. And I was talking about things in their bylaws. So there's no transition period there really. But I suppose sometimes if you don't know, you don't know. So encourage the organization to run more training programs. I would suggest at some point in time, definitely you must have a training program on interpretation of financial statement. That's huge. I can't stress that enough. Yeah. Somebody, Ken Jarvis, is saying the importance of the supervisory committee and its relation to the FIU during this time. Now, that's a touchy area because I have, wearing my other hat, I often do things like external compliance audits. And I've seen when I ask the question, who did the internal compliance audit? They tell me the supervisory committee. And I ask the question, where they learn to do that? No, they can't do it if they've never been taught how to do it. So you see the problem there already. Yeah. I am seeing Mr. Maxwell's hand raised.
Yes,
Oh,
you have given us so much, so I want to get into the question because
no, go brave man.
right. The first question I have is there an age limit to be a member of the supervisory committee? I'm asking that question is because in the bylaws there is under membership that's I tend to control after you retire, you know what I mean, or not become a part of organization. So this is what
In
I'm
the
asking that question.
bylaws, you say? I would love to see that. The only thing I can recall that seems to relate to age really comes from the Act, the Cooperative Societies Act. And there's a stipulation, an age stipulation to be an elected officer. And if I remember correctly, I think that's 18. But there is no upper limit by law that says you cannot serve. Yeah?
My second question I could ask, we can't see nobody put up the hand here, is that
Yeah.
you touch on a very important point when you're talking about recycle members. And that is one of the things, not just for credit unions, but in everything in Trinidad and Tobago. There is a way that membership, especially in labor unions and so on, recycle. What? And I only ask you because of your experience, as I saw your background there. And maybe you might have an idea why something like that could happen. That is my question.
Well, the easy answer, we're lazy. We are lazy. You see, very often people love to comment and complain. So everybody wants change, but nobody wants to change. The credit union belongs to all of us. We have our life savings there, but not enough people want to step forward and do the necessary work. So that those who are willing to step forward, maybe they have the organization's best interest at heart, or maybe they just enjoy going CCCU and walk you. I don't know. But I am a firm believer in the fact that the job of a good leader is to prepare the organization for when they're no longer there. Yeah? Somebody asked, oh God, I just lost it. Hang on, let me get it again. Something about intervening. Hold on. Did I do it?
But looks like the person withdrew the question. Mr. Royce, I
Oh,
think it
I
was you.
it and then I ain't seen it again.
Yes, I think he took off the question.
All right, but if I remember it, 'cause I thought it was important. If I remember correctly, the question had to do with whether or not the outgoing supervisory committee could intervene at an AGM if they see something that is going contrary. I suppose I lost the last part, maybe the bylaws. Short answer is yes. Any member, if they observe something out of order, could intervene. Depending on when it comes up, I would suggest using on the rules of meeting a point of order. Now, a point of order is an important method because it allows you to interrupt. In almost every other case, you must first obtain the permission of the chair. But a point of order allows you to interrupt, and the process is you interrupt by saying, Mr. Chairman, on a point of order, but it must happen immediately after the infraction. And once you have the opportunity to speak, the first thing you need to talk about is what was the infraction. You can't start no long monologue. You have to say what was the infraction. It requires no seconder to the motion, and it requires no vote. Yeah. So I hope that helped there. Maxwell.
Yeah, I wanna qualify the question actually, especially pertaining to recycle members. And why I want to go at it is that recently we had a problem in the Cement and Waterfront Workers Trade Union as to the leadership. That ended up in a nasty battle, but somehow the papers hadn't informed us much of what was taking place. And I want to compare that with the political situation of Grenada, where we have this very young blood guy as our prime minister. I mean, it's so appreciative to see these young people being thrown in the sea, and have to survive. And this is what I'm looking at, because when you watch at the problem with Cement and Waterfront Workers Trade Union, where there's a battle to get rid of a person who had been for 100 years as a leader of the union, and you compare with country, and that I was seeing that in the Caribbean for long, because Antigua did it years before that. When you look at the immigration officers and so on in those countries, they are so young, yet still they are not arrogant. One of the problems in our country, and I can say so because at my age, there's a lot of arrogance from young people. So what I'm qualifying my statement in is that situation where members who are at management, I wouldn't say management, who are leadership, by asking for votes, are tending to, for some reason, being able to influence the membership that they alone could do the job. And that is poor. Thanks.
Well, I would throw two things where that is concerned. One, I would encourage the organization, all the committees, to come up with a mechanism to assess the performance of the board and other committees. Whether it's a 360 thing, but how do you assess the performance of these committees? Because why we voting them back? Yeah? Why they passing through the nomination committee? I remember once I was assisting a nomination committee in another credit union, and this stuck with me because I insisted we must interview the nominees. Some people resisted that because I hear a long time, I don't need no interview. But I say, as long as I'm part of the committee, I'm going to interview you. And there was one person in particular who had served on the credit committee for years. And I asked that person, what is the policy regarding debt service ratio in this credit union? And anytime I ask a person a question, and the first thing out of the mouth is, I know they're in trouble already. The person said to me, well, we don't really have a policy in this credit union. But that person has been approving loans for years. How could a financial institution don't have a policy concerning debt service ratio? So that's one, how we assessing the performance. The second thing I will ask the question, what, as part of Tranquility Credit Union strategic plan, what is the area that we have laid out to encourage the next generation of leaders in the credit union? Because you have a couple thousand members. You're not big. So what are we doing to attract the next generation? Because the next generation doesn't necessarily want to attend an annual general meeting that's running for hours to hear a bunch of old people argue with one another. So what's the plan? Because if we don't have a plan, it means we're doing the same thing the same way and expecting a different result, which is a definition of madness. I remember a few years ago, I would think more than 10 or 15 years ago, Kuna International did a survey, and it concluded that same phrase I use, gerontocracy. It basically means rule by old people. And that was a problem across the movement. If you look around boards and even most committees in our credit union movement, what's the average age? 60? 65? No, I'm not saying we simply brushing aside experience. There is something to be said for experience. But if the next conversation in the financial services sector is about electronic money, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and cryptocurrency, dealing with that? Who planning for that? I remember once I was doing something on credit, and a credit committee said to me that they had one or two people coming and applying for loans to trade in cryptocurrency. And I said, but you know, that's interesting. I said, did you all approve the loan? They said, well, yeah. I said, do you understand how cryptocurrency works? Well, no. Do you understand how blockchain works? Well, no. They approve the loan. So what happens? Either one, when the person can't pay, because you don't understand what mechanism was supposed to be used to pay back the loan. That's one. What happens when that person is trading in cryptocurrencies such as Monero or Zcash, which are two types of cryptocurrency that are very popular on the dark web, that have been banned by certain platforms because what they're used for. So if you don't know what that is, because you haven't asked the question, and the person gets money from that and brings it into the credit union, is it a case now that the credit union, Tranquility Credit Union, is now in receipt of the proceeds of crime? Interesting, right? So how do we plan for the next generation? Talk to me.
So as you know, so interesting as usual. This is Annalisa. So I mean, I could just listen. I am sorry I was late, but I could just hear that this information is always something new. You know, voluntarism is a big problem in the country as a whole, where people are asked to give up their time, their talent. It's, you know, it's the credit union. My husband is in Special Olympics, you know, you're in church groups, you're in different groups, you know, the 2080. So you just have to, and I love your word, gerontocracy.
Gerontocracy.
You know, two sides to that coin. You know, we see it in the States where, you know, you have two extremes where when you approach 60, people want to put you out to farm. But in Europe and in the States, they want your experience, and you work as long as you can, as long as you want. You can work at UE, you can work at to 70. You know, my father worked until 75, very active. You know, they have people running billion-dollar companies, countries, up to, you know, look at Trump. But at the same time, you want fresh blood. You need it. You need diversity. You need to reflect your membership. You need to reflect, so you need that balance. Succession planning and doing more of what I see that we are doing now, doing more public education, not just, I mean, we're doing it now, but I think the plan is to continue. And I always say, if it's 5 people turn up, it's 5 people, it's 5 interested people doing more of the education that we are doing now, some face-to-face, because guess what? I'm sure everybody here would like to sit down and hear you talk to them for an hour. They come into the next one in person, right? And it's really having the patience and putting and understanding the importance of member education, and it has to be programmatic. It has to be continuous. Every 2 months we are doing something, and talking to our membership, not just about roles and responsibilities, but cutting edge things. We did something just now on data and security. And so you're educating yourself. We want to do something on cryptocurrency. Yes, you're talking to the young people. Hey, are you interested in that? What? Hey, there's something I could relate to. And doing trending topics and doing your foundational topics every 2 months, doing it on a consistent basis. Because eventually you will build more of the new numbers, more of the new faces here, and you therefore plan for your succession planning. You know, if it's going to be 2080 and, you know, it's a few people volunteering, we just have to keep on at it. So more and more. It's not singular to us. You know, we know people and we understand they come and they realize it's so much time they can't keep up. They have to balance their life, their children, and maybe that's the whole gerontocracy thing. But you don't stop. We have to keep on having more of these sessions to build knowledge and keep it interesting, you know, talk about the AI, so then people would be, oh, I could learn something. So the more informed we are, because in my experience, listen, not everybody wants to lead. You might critique that, you may challenge that, but not everybody wants to. But guess what? Those who are on the margins, we need to pull them up. We need to pull them along and give them the tools to lead and build that constituency, build that. That's one of the ways. Continue doing it, and it's not sporadic, it's not ad hoc, it has to be consistent. And do that, you know, continue doing that. Have a session on the truck hack, you know, have a session on the forgery act and fraud. So if you have interesting topics, talk about fraud, people will come and talk about that. And in between that, you talk about the credit union underneath, you know. So we build constituency by continuing to offer more of this, and kudos to the nomination committee and the policy that says that this has to, and our public education, and it will, you know, we live in optimism that this will grow. We will be, but we have to talk their language. We have to talk to that generation and stop the divide. So if it is, you have experience, you need to understand this is not a want. You need to have a diverse membership. You need to have young people in their 20s, every generation. What it's called now is Alpha, what? Alpha now.
They're running out of alphabet.
But the point is we need, and we in our conservatism, because we conservative too, because I have tried, I've seen it, the church group and them put up their hand. They want young people. When you come, them I want you know. When you come here, you come to take over. This is my power base. This is mine. So we balance it by the people in the middle buffering and encouraging, because I have seen that happen in a lot of organizations. The older ones, they say, yes, we want young people. When they come, that's a stupid idea. And then the young person says, me, I have no time for you. So by having more of these conversations, that's one way. That's all I could, you know, that's one way. Never stop and try it.
Yep.
And having interesting people like you, Mr. Chambers, who will have people, and making it so we understand the seriousness of the role, but we could learn. You could learn. So we're not intimidating people. Because I think maybe some intimidation is used, because yes, some people are protecting their base. I see that. But we will continue doing more of this. That's my contribution.
Thank you. And as you talk about fraud, just last week, our credit union asked me about that. Now, we do it regularly as part of the private company I'm part of. And what I've realized is that, and it might be useful for your members, I don't know how you could control it, because you can't, well, at least I can't do a virtual session on fraud. Because normally when we do that, we also teach people how to identify counterfeit currency and counterfeit identification documents. And you can't do that online. It has to be face-to-face, because some of the techniques for detecting counterfeit currency says that you must actually be able to feel the currency. So I've noticed that people normally get excited about that because everybody has heard of somebody's experience receiving a fake $20 or that kind of thing. And funny story, because I've seen it from time to time. I go in a place and I see whether it's a $20 or $100 bill stuck up on the wall by the cashier. And normally if I see that, I'll ask, I say, why you have that there? And you know what's the response? Somebody pass it to us, so we want to show people that we keeping tabs and we checking on them. And at that point, I normally whisper to them, I know you don't know, so I'm telling you quietly. It is an offense to have counterfeit currency in your possession, and you are advertising that you have it in your possession. So my best advice to you is to take it down. And they don't know. So there's a lot of ignorance about that. The other thing that amusingly, I was in Barbados last week, and somewhere I went, and I didn't have any Bajan money, so I wanted to pay with US, but I only had $100 US. So the lady said, we change US, but we don't change $100 US. And I smiled to myself because it is a statistical fact that if you are counterfeiting US, the most counterfeited is not the $100, it's actually the $20 bill. So there they are making an assumption in their business about something that might be counterfeit. That's totally incorrect. So those are just two little things there. Mr. Maxwell, your hand will be tired. I see your hand in the air.
I love your last statement about counterfeit because I learned about that as being a juror. When I saw it came up, I said, well, anybody pass counterfeit, I tear it up and run fast. Anyhow, my question, this is my last question. I don't want to this is so interesting, but I'll make this my last question. And asking this question pertaining to what Afisa asks in his sense from moving from the supervisor committee to the board. So my question is it possible that if you are a past director, if you could be nominated toward the supervisory committee? Because she asked that question, make me think about that. Thank you.
On the face of it, yeah, you have to check to see what your bylaw says. Unless there is some bar within your bylaw, and that's quite unlikely. Some bylaws have maybe a cooling off period of a year or whatnot, or some bylaws have term limits to say that you can't serve more than 3 consecutive terms on any one statutory committee. So it's all up to what your bylaw says. Oh, it kind of jumps to my mind as I glance down and I see forgery out there. What I have noticed is a problem, not just in credit unions, but people come to apply for loans and they come with a job letter, they come with a payslip. But in some cases, they have either forged the job letter or they took a job letter from their employer and they altered it and then came to you. So that all of those are things you must have in contemplation. Or you hire an employee and the employee gives you fake, what do they say, false papers? Right. Those things happen as well. So people, you know, I say I stop at 7 o'clock and then we talk for about half an hour after. Yeah.
That's because you're interested in Mr. Chambers. All right, we'll close with one last question and then we'll go to the vote of thanks. One last question for Mr. Chambers while we have all of his expertise here to our demand.
Go Brave, this might be the $100 question.
Okay, maybe I should ask the last question. In your
But
opinion,
you can't get the $100.
why not? In your opinion, what do you which committee do you think is the most important committee in a credit union?
That's a trick question. None of them are more important than the other. They're equally important, they simply have different functions. Yeah. Now, I know some board members will feel that they're more important than supervisory or credit, but that's a myth. They're all equally important. The functions are simply different.
All right, thank you for that, Mr. Chambers. Now we will go across to Ms. Pariag, who will deliver our vote of thanks for us today. Ms. Pariag.
Thank you, Christine. Well, Mr. Chambers, the most I can say is I don't think that I could do you enough justice, but I will certainly try. I want to give you a special thanks on behalf of our board of directors, our nomination committee that put this session together, our management and staff that has been very supportive and engaging in this particular training session in anticipation of our annual general meeting coming up. And a special thanks as well to all of the registered participants that joined us this evening. Thank you very much to all of you. In summarizing as much as possible what Mr. Chambers has given us, I want to say to all these members here that he made reference to daunting tasks for this committee, but in truth and in fact, what he has given us are provoking thoughts geared towards not just creating a daunting image of what is involved, but a methodical approach to establish the tasks at hand for this committee and preparing each member psychologically as well and experience-wise beforehand so that they would be more prepared to engage in this activity, allowing themselves to be elected, and also for them to be able to perform at the best of their abilities. The checklists that he has given us outlines the tasks, the processes to perform and adhere to. And he made specific references to Chapter 81, the Constitutions, Section 69, and all these things are geared really towards preparing us for what the committee has to engage in once the member is elected at our AGM. So it's not daunting, as I would like to say again, but it is a question of preparedness. And there's a lot of work to be done, but I would like to emphasize to each member that it's not just about giving yourself up for a nomination process and an elective process and then being successful at your AGM. It's also about sacrifice, volunteerism, and I can safely tell you that the sacrifice is worth it when you see the objectives of the credit union being achieved, when you have a form of cohesiveness with other individuals, knowing that you are achieving the best for others financially and otherwise. So I hope that each and every one of you have been satisfied with the presentation this evening. I cannot floor Mr. Chambers' presentation whatsoever, right? He has been very generous in his experience and knowledge. So to tie this up, thank you very much, each and every one of you. Christine, I hand it over back to you.
Thank you, Ms. Pariag. As Ms. Pariag would have expressed, Mr. Chambers, we thank you. We give you our heartfelt thanks for embarking so much knowledge upon us. And we look forward to meeting you with you again on different occasions to speak about different sessions, because we know you have a great wealth of knowledge to share with us. Thank you everyone for joining, and have a good night. Be safe.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone. Thanks.
Have a good night. Mm.
Good night.
Good night.
Right.
Don't forget tomorrow.